So like I said, I watched all of this from afar. But I just learned that the three of you either covered it or had close family ties to Katrina. So when you hear it's been 20 years, is that hard to believe?
Big time.
It is hard to believe. It's hard to believe that Chris is that old.
And Joe.
I had a lot more hair back then.
No, the images, though, they're like seared in. And I don't know if that has something to do with it not feeling like it was that long ago, but it just doesn't. It doesn't. Because some of those, I'll never forget some of those visuals, some of those pictures and what those people are going through. And for me, you guys know, I lived there. So I knew that street. I know that convention center well. The Superdome was in tatters. I'd been in it a million times.
It was home.
It was my second home. You're right, Chris. I mean, that's what it became, and it was tough.
And Amy is from Louisiana too, right?
She is. So, she grew up in one of the places that was hit the hardest. The house she grew up in had 8 foot of water in it.
Where did she grow up?
So she was in Chalmette.
Okay,
right?
okay.
And that was, Buccaneer Villa underwater, like the entire first floor underwater, and all those shots of the rooftops and everything. I mean, that was her house.
How would you describe that area pre-Katrina? What made it so special and beautiful and home?
I mean, for her, it was one of those little special places in New Orleans, right? And it was home for her, and they had the house there and everything. And regular 2-story house. Again, Buccaneer Villa, that's the spot. It was really nice. And man, it just got ravaged, like so many places in the town.
Now, where was she at that point, Joe?
We were here, and we had family here. We had her family here.
So they all left there and came over
here.
When the storm warning started coming in.
Yeah, okay. Exactly. So they got here a couple days before the storm. And so we had her mom, her sister and her sister's in-laws, a friend, one of her best friends, one of my best friends from college.
All at your house?
So all at my house.
For how long?
Yeah. Well, that's the funny part. Some people stayed for 5 days. My buddy from college stayed for like 2 months. Wow. He did. And Amy's best friend ended up getting an apartment after a couple of months and staying here in North Texas for a while before she moved back. So, yeah, it was unbelievable stuff.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because just a couple months ago, this guy came up to me at my kid's school and said, Joe Trahan, when we moved here to North Texas, when Katrina drove us out, watching Joe on TV brought us so much comfort. And I heard you were running into people from New Orleans at the local Home Depot?
Everywhere. Best Buy, the grocery store, Home Depot, everywhere. There's so many New Orleanians here. And, some of them knew that I had left, and a lot of them didn't. They're like, oh, it's good
you
to
came
see
too,
you.
yeah.
Yeah, they're like, oh, I drove you out too. And I'm like, no, I've actually been here a couple years, working here. But, that was kind of my viewpoint of it through the lens of all these friends and people I knew. It was actually hard for me to not go there, you guys. But we had work to do here, and I couldn't go, and we had people there. But it was hard to watch it from afar for me.
But Pete, you did go there.
Yeah, I was there for a little over a week. Got there before it made landfall in New Orleans. We left here, and it was almost surreal. I was with longtime reporters here, Brad Watson, Jim Douglas. We had photographers, producers that we went with, and we were all on a Southwest flight out of Love, but we were the only people on the plane. Literally, the Channel 8 people were there with nobody else. And we're like, we can't even believe that this flight's leaving, but they take us there.
Into New Orleans,
okay. Into Louis Armstrong.
Everyone else is trying to get out. Y'all going in.
Which was the surreal part of that. So we land, and you get off the plane, you're walking through the terminal and all that stuff, and everyone's going the other direction. They're all going to get on the last couple of flights, because we were one of the last flights to get in. And everyone's leaving, we're coming in, and then as you leave, you've been to that airport dozens of times. You go downstairs, you're going to get your car, and then I felt like I was in this weird movie, because there's nobody there. Right. That part of the airport was empty. No one's renting a car. But we're going to rent SUVs because we're going to be here. I don't know how long you're going to be there. I brought enough clothes for a couple of days. I ran out of clothes at some point. And certainly you couldn't go do laundry or anything like that, so you just make the best of it. But, we get our rental car, and then we leave the airport, and it just kept building. And then no one was around. It was a ghost town. there was nobody there. Everybody had evacuated at that point, or those that could. And so then we're going to head to the Superdome, and we get around the Superdome, and we're going to set up and figure out what we're going to do, where we're going to stay, and all of that. And then all of a sudden, we get a phone call, and I'm brand new. I've only been here, I start here in June, this happens in August. So I've only been here a few months. And they're like, this is probably going to be too dangerous. So we're going to send you over to Baton Rouge. You're going to the Louisiana Department of Homeland Security. And so we start heading over that way. But one of the weird, 20 years ago, it's hard to believe because some of these memories, it's like it happened yesterday. And one of the memories, I think one of the most vivid, there's two that are vivid, the one I just described. The other one was when we got off the plane. Remember, this is 20 years ago. We all had Blackberries.
No cell phones.
Yeah. So I had my Blackberry, and I'm looking at the latest update from the Hurricane Center, and the latest update had it, at that time, Katrina was the most powerful hurricane ever recorded in the Gulf of Mexico. Now, I'm married, I've got 2 little kids, I've got like a 5-year-old, I've got a 7-year-old at home, and I'm like, what am I getting myself into? All the hurricanes I had been through when I started my career in Florida, I'm like, okay, but this is different. This is at that time, the most powerful hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico. There have since been 2 that were just a tad bit stronger, but I'm like, what am I doing? And it was truly, it was a bit frightening. So I'll never ever forget looking at that. And I called our then news director, Michael Valentine, and he goes, are you guys okay? And I told him the update, and he goes, you're kidding? I said, no. I said, I don't know what we should be doing. He goes, just go to the Superdome. I think they then talked, and then they decided, given the landfall, which at that point it was supposed to be New Orleans, it then shifted to the east into Mississippi. I think that's one of the reasons why, we've got our new guy on TV here. We need to ensure that he can be on TV. To heck with his safety. I'm joking. But we need to make sure that we can ensure his safety, number one. And they had told me that multiple times, but we needed him to be on TV. That's when they shifted me east to, or west, I should say, over to Baton Rouge.
And Chris, you were with CNN at the time, right?
Yeah, I was with CNN. I flew by myself. I was working in Chicago. I flew down to Houston, and I was supposed to link up with a producer and a photographer, but when I got there and landed, they said, well, we had to pull your producer for something else, and Anderson Cooper is one of his photographers. A camera fell in the water, so we had to pull your photographer, and he's got to go to Anderson now in Mississippi, on the Mississippi side. So I was just kind of by myself for a good chunk of time there. And I ended up just going to Baton Rouge. And I was in Baton Rouge when it made landfall. And it was after that, remember it made landfall in Mississippi. And we thought, okay, that's where the biggest damage is going to be, in Mississippi. And then, of course, the levees broke, and that sort of changed everything.
What did you see out there?
Well, I ended up driving back into New Orleans. So, right after the levees broke, I drove back into New Orleans, and again, I was by myself, and I wasn't really sure what I was going to do, but I ended up finding a CNN crew. CNN had a big presence there in New Orleans, but it was like Pete said, they lost about 3 vehicles in the storm where they were parked in a garage that completely flooded. So they lost all their vehicles, and there were some of the crew just felt it was too dangerous, didn't want to be in there anymore, and so CNN pulled them out. But there was a small group, a photographer, a couple producers who refused to leave. And I just randomly, because I had a CNN ball cap on, I randomly ran into a guy on the street in New Orleans, and we linked up, and we just started reporting from outside the convention center and going around the town, to document what was happening.
What were you reporting on?
People being plucked off the roofs, I would imagine. I mean, that's when a lot of that was taking place.
And also disinformation that we were hearing?
Yeah, we were hearing a lot of stuff about, I do want to say one thing. We had no communication. So no communication. Like Pete said, you had a BlackBerry, self-service. Once you got within 10, 15 miles of New Orleans, it was useless. and we actually had to work off the payphone on the street. That was the only way we could get calls back in and out.
When did you find out when the levees broke? That's what I'm very curious in terms of the timeline, because it went from, like you said, thinking, whew, we missed the big one. That's what a lot of people in New Orleans thought. The levees break, and then it's a completely different ball game. On the ground, when did you get that information?
I got that when I was in Baton Rouge, and I started driving into New Orleans at that point. And it was really tough because the GPS was useless. The GPS would tell you, go down this street. Well, that street disappears in like 5 feet. It's gone. It's submerged underwater. So you're using old school maps, trying to figure out, like, how am I going to get around? This street is blocked. This street is blocked. And I think I ended up going on, this, Joe, from being in New Orleans. I went back on high ground and came all the way around and came back down into the French Quarter
There's
area.
a couple of elevated freeways that are around downtown that, and I'm sure you remember from all the footage you've seen, they turned into de facto boat launches right during the storm. And those are those elevated highways that they have kind of around downtown.
Chris, did you see, what did you see in the water? I understand you saw bodies.
Yeah, I saw, I can't even count, but you saw bodies in the water, bodies laying on the street where that part of the water had receded. We were right outside the convention center, and people were dying. I remember this elderly woman, they just kind of put a blanket over her. She was in a wheelchair, and they just pushed her wheelchair up against the wall of the convention center. Because what are they going to do? There's nothing they could do. These people had no food, no water. You're seeing moms with these babies with diapers that are 3-4 days old, soiled diapers. They had no diapers. And I heard a lot about, there were these reports of looting. I didn't see any looting. I did see people breaking into a convenience store and coming out of there with soda, water, chips, candy bars. They were hungry. They had no water, no food. I saw that, to me, was survival. Especially since when you're down there, you're wondering, you don't know when the help is coming. Every day we'd go out and we'd be reporting, and we didn't know when that situation was going to change. And I had to get on the phone to talk to them to hear what was being said, like at the national level. I had no access to any of that. We were cut off from all of that.
How did that feel, professionally and personally, to be cut off and to be basically on your own out there?
I just couldn't believe, this was a major American city. I'm like, I've been to New Orleans before. I'm like, I know that building. I know that street. This is a major American city where it had fallen. There was no mayor, no security.
Well, I can tell you where the mayor was.
Yeah.
The mayor was over in Baton Rouge.
Yeah.
There were two places to eat in Baton Rouge, Ruth's Chris and Waffle House. And the one night that we were tired of eating Waffle House, because there was no power over there. Now, it wasn't nearly like what New Orleans was, not even remotely close. But I remember at one point, the mayor literally sitting across from me at the table at Ruth's Chris. And and it's not like everybody's having steaks. they were just serving the bare whatever. They were just trying to throw some food together for people to eat. But I remembered seeing him sitting there on a day where he was being condemned for not being over there. And I'm like, oh my gosh, there he is right here in Ruth's Chris eating when he's the mayor of this city, an hour or so away. And these people are dying over there. What's he doing here?
On that note, when you were pulled back to Baton Rouge, did you have any idea of what would happen in the coming days?
No, not at all. Not at all. I could have never, pictured that. And I lived in Florida and worked, my first story that I did was Hurricane Andrew. And that was horrible. I could not have, but I had only been in the TV business for 4 months at that point. So I was so new, I think I was just completely clueless. But being older and having a lot of experience at that point, I still couldn't have grasped that. I will tell you though, driving on that bridge from New Orleans all the way over, you know, I mean, there's a lot of water, and we drove over that evening right before it made landfall. It was scary because water was splashing up.
It was lapping over the road.
It was lapping over the road, and I'm telling Alan, but man, do you think we can make it? And you couldn't go any faster because, I mean, it was everybody who could drive was on that road. I mean, I'm like, and the wind was picking up, the water was lapping over. You're right.
From a meteorological standpoint, try to say that 3 times in a row. How would you have described it?
Well, I mean, you know, the problem in New Orleans is you guys know, it wasn't the hurricane, it was the levees. So, you know, once we knew that it kept shifting farther east, it was like, okay, New Orleans they're gonna have problems. But, you know, it's not gonna be like Mississippi. I mean, I think Mississippi had like a 20-some foot storm surge. I mean, a 20-foot wall of water, are you kidding me? I mean, that's unbelievable. So New Orleans didn't take the brunt of the storm, but the after effect was horrendous. I don't think, and no one could have ever, you know, fathomed that or, you know, predicted that.
Levees that didn't hold, and all those homes in the Ninth Ward and other places that were built in such low-lying areas.
Well, a city below sea level.
And that's the thing for our viewers who don't know. I mean, it's like a saucer of a teacup. I mean, the city is below sea level, and once those levees breached, all that water just flows in. Water's going to flow to its lowest level, and it did to so many of those homes. The one just crazy image that I'll never forget, when after the levees broke, I saw some aerials, and they were over the eastern part of New Orleans, and it was where I used to play golf, you guys. And you know, these golf courses have these huge nets that are 40, 50 foot tall with huge poles. And I look and I'm like, the water was 3/4 up that pole, and I'm like, oh my God.
I remember, I can't remember if it was Jim Douglas or Brad Watson, who were reporters here for decades. They left New Orleans at one point because, I mean, I was there, I think it was either 8 or 9 days, but they left New Orleans to come over to Baton Rouge to report there with me. And I'm like, what was it like over there? Like, we've never seen anything like this. And these are guys, you know, that are 15, 20 years older than me, who've been in the business. You know, these guys are like network quality guys. And I'm like, and these guys have covered wars. I mean, like you know, they've been in the Middle East and different parts of the world, you know, covering really bad stuff. And when you hear a guy like that say, I've never seen anything like it, it's like, my gosh, what are these poor people over here? And then we're seeing the video, they're picking people off of rooftops and all the horrendous things that they had to experience.
And those were the people who made it to a
Correct.
rooftop. A lot of them used hatchets and axes to literally bust through their roof to climb out to the top.
Were you ever in dire straits, Chris? I mean, was it ever dangerous, like where you were?
And where did you sleep?
We slept in the vehicle. We piled in one night. One night we slept on the roof of a police station. I mean, we were in somewhat the same boat in that there's no hotels, there's nowhere to go. I remember one night, one of the producers I was with, he had a buddy who had an apartment in New Orleans, and he was able to get hold of him, and he said, I think the first floor is flooded, but if you can get to the second floor, you could stay there. And he said, don't worry about it, just bust the lock. And so we made it over there, we busted the lock, and sure enough, like you're wading through water, but the steps are there, and we got to the second floor, and I remember all of us, even, it was like three or four guys and one woman, and we all just like stripped down to our underwear and like laid on the floor to go to sleep, because it was so, I mean, just, you know,
It's still August,
yes,
it's
well,
hot,
August.
it's humid, you feel like you're underwater.
That's the thing that people forget is, you know, it's the problems begin after it makes landfall. Yeah. You don't have power. Typically you don't have water. And I've heard you tell that story before about the situation for you guys in New Orleans, and for us in Baton Rouge. I'm like, I'm not going to complain. You know, I slept 2 nights on the floor at the Louisiana Department of Homeland Security. Then we moved to an Embassy Suites. And we slept on the floor at Embassy Suites, like 8 of us in a room. I mean, because to your point, Chris, there just was nowhere to go, and you had all these people. There was no hot water. We did have water. We didn't have power, but at least we had a room. You know. But then I think, and none of us complained because we're seeing the videos coming out of New Orleans. We're like, oh my gosh, these people are just, it's death every day.
And Pete, I think you had only been at WFAA for 2 months. What was it like to be handed a story to cover like this, of this magnitude, so early in your tenure here?
Well, prior, you know, I had been in the TV business doing others, you know, doing as a meteorologist 9 years in Cincinnati and 4 in Orlando, so 13 before here. So it wasn't the first time I had done that kind of stuff. But being the new guy, replacing, you know, Troy Dungan, you know, there's a lot of weight on you to go and prove yourself. But you just, you know, at that point, I just want to do a good job. I just want to do a good job. And then you get there and you have that surreal moments, like I said, at the airport and all the other things. And then it's like, okay, this is so much bigger than proving yourself to your bosses. You know what I mean? And then you just see how impactful this is on people's lives. And that's the one thing, you know, there are some meteorologists, and I don't believe that anyone loves that stuff, but I hate it when we see these big hurricanes. I hate it when we have tornadoes. I hate it when we have these ice storms, because bad things happen to really good people. And so for me as a meteorologist, it's like, gosh, I just hate this, because I know what's going, and you know, at my age now, after all these years, like you guys, we know the stuff that's probably going to happen, because it happens all the time. We've done this long enough. And so how did I feel? It was worrisome for all those people in the path, because I had a confidence level they were going to keep me safe, even though it was scary. Truly it was. But I was really frightened for the people there as to what it was going to do to them.
You talk a lot about the people. Chris, Pete, y'all met a lot of people where you were. Who will you always remember? Who you met out there?
I think the two people that really stand out to me were a mom down at the convention center with her baby, and especially now looking back as a father with 3 kids, and like, to have your baby with no diapers, with not knowing when you're going to get access to food and water again, just, she was despondent and sad and furious and frustrated all at once. And you know, your heart is breaking, because this shouldn't happen. You know, those people were just left there. They were left there. They were abandoned for days and days and days. And the other was one of the police officers we met from the New Orleans Police Department. And I can tell you, like, the ones who stayed, they were pissed. They were pissed at the officers who did not show up.
I remember that.
And come in. And I remember them, they had no command and control. You know, they didn't have any marching orders from a commissioner or the mayor. They had no communication. They just, in fact, the police station, they weren't even all assigned to that police station. They just, that's where they all ended up. They were all able to get there. And they would go out and do what they could, you know, just on their own, just pure police work, trying to make a difference, but feeling very abandoned themselves. You know, where's our direction? Where's the hierarchy here? What's our plan? You know, they had to just go off instinct and say, look, hey, we're here to protect and serve. We're going to go out and look for ways to do that.
Yeah, and you know, guys, I had kind of this view from the people who, you know, a couple of our friends who saw and knew that their homes were not going to be there, right? Because you would see some videos of some areas and they're like, that's only 2 blocks from my house. If that's what it looks like there, my house is gone. It is gone. And, you know, I kind of got that viewpoint of the toll that it was taking on people who weren't there and people who left. And it was obviously exponentially worse for people who had to stay. It was so impactful to so many people on so many different levels. And you know, it's hurricanes are a way of life there, right? Before I came here, you know, I did the sports there for 9 years, right? And you always were wary, but so many times, as Pete knows, they veer and they miss and they go the other way, and you have the hurricane party and all that other stuff, but you're always wary. And this one was just so different because everybody had that sense when it got so powerful that, this might be the one. Yeah. And the hardest part was we dodged it, but then the water still came because of the levees. Yeah.
Which speaks to the frustration that I have. I didn't, you know, I'm in Baton Rouge, you know, so I'm dealing with a lot of government officials and of that sort. But the frustration I have is the levees, and like you said, Chris, people were abandoned. And I saw the mayor that one night, and then other reporters and colleagues of ours saw him multiple other nights. And I'm like, this man is sitting here living the high life at this restaurant, and there's people dying in his city. What leader does that? So for me, that was something that I'll never ever forget, seeing him sitting there and then hearing that he was there other nights as well, when all of these horrible things are taking place in the city that he's the mayor of. And that's when you show leadership, you know, is when...
Well, it was a failure on the local, the state,
no
and
question.
the federal level.
No
Like,
question.
all three
All
levels
of the
of
above.
government failed those people.
So on that note, so many lessons learned from residents to emergency responders to officials. What did the storm teach y'all?
I think it just taught me, it taught me a lot about just trusting my instincts and seeing how they would serve me well, not depending on a boss, a meeting to come to a decision about where you should go and what you should do. It showed me that, you know, take away everything else, we're reporters. And we have certain instincts that show us how to report. And that showed me, you know, if you trust those instincts, it'll lead you to where you need to be.
Yeah. For me, it just reinforced something, you know, help any way you can, right? And if that meant taking in all those family members and friends, you do it. And I do recall there was at one point when they were having trouble getting information that mattered to them, right? Because we did all we could, and we'd get as many videos here on WFAA that we could, but they were like, man, we just want to see something local. So I got on the internet and figured out a way to get WWL's, our affiliate there, the CBS affiliate there, was able to get that signal on the internet. And they were like, okay, at least now we have a window into how tough it was. So it's just help any way you can and help all you can.
Yeah. It really, for me, I just think, you know, it's a great lesson and a reminder of how fragile life is. Mm. Yeah. And you take so many things for granted, and, you know, and you know, you talk about the hurricane parties and all of that happen there all the time, and, oh, I rode this one out, it'll be fine. And just when you think you figured Mother Nature out, you know, something else happens. So, man, always have a plan. Yeah. And I think, Chris, it's the point that you made about being self-sufficient, you know, because there were so many people there that could have left that maybe didn't, but then there were a whole lot of people there that couldn't leave on their own. Mm-hmm. And that's, I think, up to us as just from a humanity standpoint, you know, don't we all have that responsibility, you know, to help? And I think, as you guys mentioned, you know, from the federal level all the way down to the local level, there were a whole lot of things that went wrong, but I think, you know, for me, I just think, boy, life is really fragile.
And on that note, I think I'll end with this. You talk about life being so fragile. So many precious lives were lost. And we as humans, I think we really try to hold on to hope. From this tragedy, what brought you hope?
I'll go. Because seeing the Superdome the way it was, and it had become this symbol of the failure, along with the convention center.
I remember Oprah there.
Right? And that was so tough, but to see New Orleans, sorry.
It's your second home.
they rebuilt, and it showed something that I knew about the city. Hardworking people, good people who've been through a lot. You know, there's not a whole lot of Fortune 500 companies in that entire state. People there have to work hard, you know, so the resilience that they showed, and that building kind of became a symbol. Sorry, you guys. Sorry about that.
You know, and I think of that, Joe, I think of after like 9/11. You think of that Yankees game, you know, when
Yeah.
that all happened and how we kind of all came together, you know, as a country. And then I think the same thing with Katrina, as you're describing, you know, that the Superdome was that symbol.
Yeah.
And when the Saints got back on the field, I mean, man, it was so exciting to see that. And I think the whole country, of course, was cheering, you know,
Yeah.
for people in New Orleans. And then that right there, you see how everybody kind of came around them and hugged them and loved on them and supported them. That's what gives me hope, is when you see our country come together like that, and you see them just embrace someone who has just been beaten down and has just had some really horrible things happen, and you see these other people come in and lift them up. I mean, that's what gives me hope.
And you know, you've seen this. I mean, New Orleans really is not the same city as it was beforehand. I mean, you look at all the people who came to Texas and never left.
Can
and
you
here
blame
we
them?
are, 20 years later, you know, their kids are Texans. And if they have kids, they're going to be Texans. And, you know, that storm was the moment that pulled a lot of families out of there. And a lot of those families will never go back.
Yeah, that storm just changed so many lives. You know, it's that whole sliding glass door thing. I mean, there's so many things that wouldn't have happened if it weren't for that storm. So many things we wouldn't know, we couldn't know. And listen, on the whole, I do think we have better preparedness now. It's certainly there, but I just think our overall conscientiousness when we face these storms now is higher because of what happened in New Orleans. So that's a big plus.
Describe the Superdome and what it was like.
I couldn't get to the Superdome. Yeah, we were, the way the flood hit the city and the way it bisected the city, if you were in one area, you couldn't
You were
get,
kinda
you
stuck
couldn't
there.
get to another. You were cut off. And so we could be where we were at the convention center, but we couldn't get to the Superdome. They couldn't get to where we were.
How frustrating was that? I mean, you talked about it earlier a little bit, but I mean, I know I was frustrated in Kerrville. We didn't have a whole lot of reception. Katrina sounds like a whole other level of lack of communication and
Well,
capabilities.
and think of the technology 20 years
20
ago.
years
exactly.
ago, yeah.
I mean, you know, in a lot of these disaster areas now, most of them, they'll set up portable cell towers. I mean, that didn't happen back then. I mean,
And that was the big problem after the storm hit, after that first night, you couldn't find your friends. We couldn't find some family members. You couldn't just get them on the phone and say, hey, are you okay? So you had that kind of layered on top of everything else you were dealing with, was just finding people to find out, where are you okay? Because again, there was also issues in terms of when people who did evacuate, right? You didn't even know where they were going to evacuate. Right, and it just the lack of communication overall just exacerbated all of it.
Well, I think just my final question as we end all this is, what would you say to the people who live in New Orleans now, 20 years later? What's your message to them?
good luck.
Yeah, I guess my message would be, I'm sorry this happened to you. That, you know, there was nothing that was going to stop that hurricane from hitting, but the decisions that people made, that officials made, could have mitigated some of what we saw. Nothing was going to stop Katrina from battering that area. But if they had made different decisions, if they had responded faster, some of those people wouldn't have died.
Yeah, I do, Chris, I agree. I do hate the decisions that not only were made like the week of, but 10, 20 years before. The maintenance of the levees and all of that. It was one bad decision after the other, and the folks in New Orleans paid the price. Now, I believe that the people that are living there today are better off than the people that were living there 20 years ago, because you learn from these mistakes and stuff. But I'm like you. I'm sorry that they had to go through that.
What images will forever be seared in your mind?
It's the convention center and the Superdome. I'll never forget that. Because those were places, of such joy. Because the thing about that convention center, it would like house all the Mardi Gras parades before they would start. Some of them would start there, and obviously the Superdome with the Saints and all the fun there. To see that contrasted with what you saw during Katrina, it was absolutely mind-blowing.
There was a convention there within a week of the storm. A week prior, it was filled with people going to an actual convention. And to see those people languishing in the street, some of them dying, just a week later was just, I kept looking around saying, I can't believe we're in America.
Yeah. That's exactly right, Chris. That's exactly what I thought when I saw that. Because we have a satellite truck with us, so we could see the live feeds of the crews that we had in New Orleans, and I'm watching them there at the convention center and at the Superdome. I'm like, this can't be in the United States. I can't believe that this is taking place. Just so unacceptable. And it was avoidable. So much of that was avoidable.
Yeah, you hate that the people of New Orleans had to go through that pain that, by and large, was none of their fault. Through no fault of their own, they had to literally go through hell. Just not right.
Let's pray they never have to again.
Yes, indeed.